Tank's hand slammed down on the table so hard the metal tray jumped, coffee sloshing over the rim. Every head in that mess hall turned. Sarah didn't even blink. "You think you're too good to look at me when I'm talking to you?" His voice carried across the entire cafeteria, 240 pounds of ego wrapped in camouflage. "I asked you a question, sweetheart." Before we dive into what happened next, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Watch until the very end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Trust me, you do not want to miss how this ends. Now, 30 seconds earlier, Sarah Chen had been sitting alone reviewing classified documents, minding her own business. She'd barely registered the mountain of a man approaching her table until his shadow fell across her papers. When she finally looked up, her expression was neutral, almost bored. "Can I help you with something?" Tank had expected a smile, maybe a blush. Definitely some recognition. After all, everyone at Camp Lejeune knew who he was. Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, call sign Tank, 3 tours in Afghanistan, more combat missions than most of these kids would see in their entire careers. The Navy SEAL insignia on his uniform wasn't just decoration, it was a passport to respect, to admiration, to getting whatever he wanted. But this woman, this civilian contractor, or whoever she was, had looked at him like he was interrupting something important, like he was nobody. "I'm Tank Rodriguez," he'd said, settling into the chair across from her without invitation, his smile confident, practiced. "Navy SEAL, just got back from—" "I didn't ask for your life story." Sarah's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, something that made the 2 Marines at the next table exchange glances. "I'm working." Tank's smile had frozen. Around them, conversations quieted. Then people were watching now, sensing something in the air. "Working," he'd repeated, his tone shifting, that easy confidence curdling into something harder. "Right. Let me guess you're here to check our supply orders. Make sure we're not wasting taxpayer dollars." "Something like that." "You know what I think?" Tank leaned forward, his voice dropping but somehow getting louder, at the same time more intense. "I think you civilians come in here, walk around our base like you own the place, never spent a day in combat, never put your life on the line, but you get to tell us how to do our jobs." Sarah had closed her folder, then deliberately, carefully, her movements precise. "Are you finished?" And that's when Tank made his first mistake. He laughed loud and sharp, looking around at the growing audience like they were all in on some joke. Several guys grinned back, uncertain, reading the room, trying to figure out if this was entertainment or something else. "Oh, she's got attitude," Tank announced to no one in particular. "I love it. You know what, I bet you've got some decent clearance, probably think that makes you special. But let me tell you something. Clearance doesn't mean anything out here. Out here, what matters is what you can do, what you've survived, who you are." He tapped his SEAL insignia. This is what matters." "Is it?" Sarah's tone wasn't a question. "Damn right it is. You see this trident? You know what I had to go through to earn this Hell Week, they call it, and they're not joking. 5.5 days, 4 hours of sleep, total constant physical torture. Guys twice your size quit crying. I didn't. I pushed through because I'm built different." A few heads nodded around the mess hall. Some of the younger guys were listening intently, feeding off Tank's energy. This was the Tank they knew, the legend, the storyteller, the guy who commanded every room he walked into. Then there's dive phase, jump school, advanced training. Most people can't even pronounce. By the time you get your trident, you're not the same person anymore. You're elite. You're proven. You're compensating. The mess hall went silent, absolutely, completely silent. Tank's face went red, his jaw clenching so tight you could hear his teeth grind. "What did you just say?" Sarah looked at him directly for the first time, really looked at him, and her eyes were calm, analytical, the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. "I said, are you compensating for something? Because in my experience, people who are actually elite don't need to announce it every 5 seconds." Someone at the back of the hall made a noise that might have been a strangled laugh, quickly suppressed. Tank stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor with a screech that made everyone flinch. "You got a real mouth on you, you know that? Someone should have taught you some respect." "Respect is earned, not demanded." Sarah remained seated, unimpressed. "Maybe they didn't cover that in your training." "My training," Tank's voice was rising now, control slipping. "My training made me into something you couldn't comprehend in 1,000 years. I've been shot at, blown up, seen things that would give you nightmares for the rest of your life. I've killed enemy combatants with my bare hands. I've saved lives, protected. This country bled for the flag on my shoulder. And you sit there with your little folder and your little attitude and you think you can talk to me like I'm nothing. I think you're having a very emotional reaction to a very simple interaction, Sarah said evenly. Maybe you should sit down. Maybe you should shut your mouth and learn your place. The room collectively held its breath. This had crossed a line, everyone could feel it. That invisible boundary between bravado and actual threat had been breached. A lieutenant at the far end of the hall stood up, uncertain, reading the situation, trying to decide if he needed to intervene. Sarah's expression didn't change. My place. Tell me, Staff Sergeant, where exactly do you think my place is? Tank leaned down, hands on the table looming over her, using every inch of his size to intimidate. Below me, below every man in this room who's actually put on the uniform and done the job. You civilians are guests here, and guests should know when to keep quiet and listen to their betters. Betters? Sarah repeated the word like she was tasting it, finding it wanting. Interesting choice of words. Damn right, better. I've earned my spot at the top of the food chain. 3 combat deployments, 47 confirmed missions, 2 Bronze Stars, a Navy Cross nomination. I'm not some desk jockey pushing paper. I'm the real deal, and you need to recognize that. I recognize that you're very insecure, Sarah said quietly, but somehow everyone in the mess hall heard it. Tank's hand shot out and grabbed her arm, fingers digging into flesh through her sleeve. The lieutenant who'd stood up earlier started moving toward them, but he was too far away, 20 feet at least, and things were happening too fast. I'm going to give you one chance to apologize. Tank hissed, his face inches from hers now. One chance to show me the respect I deserve. Because I'm a Navy SEAL and you're nobody, and that's just how it is. Sarah looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Her voice was very calm, very clear. You have 3 seconds to let go of me. Tank laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Or what? You gonna file a complaint? Call your supervisor. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. Nothing's going to happen to me. You know why? Because I'm protected. I'm valuable. I'm 3. A trained operator with skills this military needs. I'm irreplaceable, and you're 2. Just another civilian who thinks she's important. So why don't you 1? Tank opened his mouth to continue his rant, to reassert his dominance, to put this woman in what he considered her rightful place. He never got the chance. Sarah moved. It wasn't a wild swing or a desperate flail. It was precise, controlled, professional. Her free hand came up and struck a pressure point on his wrist, making his fingers spasm open, releasing her arm. In the same motion, she stood her chair, sliding back smoothly, and before Tank could even process what was happening, she had twisted his arm, used his own forward momentum against him, and applied pressure to 3 specific points along his shoulder, elbow, and wrist. Tank, all 240 pounds of Navy SEAL muscle, went down to one knee with a gasp of surprise and pain. The mess hall erupted, not with cheers or shouts, but with shocked inhalations, the sound of 1,000 assumptions being shattered simultaneously. Chairs scraped. People stood. The lieutenant who'd been approaching froze, caught between protocol and disbelief. What? The Tank tried to twist free, tried to use his strength, his training, his size advantage. Sarah applied a fraction more pressure, and he gasped again, his free hand slapping the floor in an involuntary submission reflex. Funny thing about joint locks, Sarah said conversationally, her voice carrying in the dead silence of the hall. They don't care how many confirmed missions you have. Physics works the same for everyone. Tank's face was purple now, rage and humiliation mixing into something toxic and volatile. You bitch when I get up from here. Sarah released him and took 2 steps back, creating distance, her posture relaxed but ready. Tank scrambled to his feet, his ego screaming at him to charge, to attack, to provoke all these watching faces that what just happened was a fluke, a lucky shot, anything but what it actually was. Think very carefully about your next move, Sarah said quietly, because everyone in this room is watching, and what happens next is going to define the rest of your career. Tank's hands were clenched into fists, his whole body vibrating with barely contained violence. 3 years of combat experience, countless hours of hand-to-hand training, every instinct honed by the team screamed at him to act, to move, to destroy this threat to his reputation. You got lucky, Tusik, he growled. That was a lucky shot and you know it. Was it? I wasn't ready. You surprised me. But now I am ready, and trust me, sweetheart, you don't want this fight. Sarah's expression remained neutral. I really don't. But I suspect you do, which is interesting from a psychological perspective. You've been physically dominated in front of your peers, and your ego can't process that reality, so you're going to double down, escalate, make this worse for yourself. All because the alternative, accepting what just happened, is too psychologically devastating for your self-image to handle. Stop using big words and fight me, Tank spat. No. The simplicity of the refusal seemed to enrage him more than anything else could have. No, you don't get to say no. You started this. You humiliated me. I defended myself when you grabbed me. That's not starting something, that's ending it. That's not how this ends. Tank's voice cracked on the last word, and in that crack, everyone could hear it, the desperation, the fear underneath all the bluster. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm not going to be made to look like a fool by some civilian contractor who got lucky with one move. Then walk away, Sarah suggested. Right now. Leave the mess hall, cool down, and we can both forget this happened. But Tank couldn't walk away. They both knew it. Walking away meant accepting defeat, meant letting this moment define him, meant every person in this room would remember Staff Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez as the SEAL who got put down by a woman and then ran away. His entire identity, everything he'd built over a decade in the military was on the line. I'm going to make you regret this, he said, his voice low and venomous. I'm going to show everyone here what happens when you disrespect me. You think you're tough. You think that one move makes you dangerous. I've fought Taliban fighters, Al-Qaeda operatives, trained soldiers with AK-47s and explosives. You're nothing. Sarah sighed, and somehow that sigh was more devastating than any insult could have been. It was the sound of a teacher disappointed that a student refused to learn, a parent watching a child make a predictable mistake, a professional recognizing that violence was now inevitable and tiresome. Last chance, she said. Walk away. Tank charged. He came in fast, using his weight and reach advantage, throwing a right hook with enough power behind it to drop most people. The move was textbook, exactly what you'd expect from someone with his training. Sarah deflected it almost lazily, redirecting his momentum, and Tank stumbled, past her off balance. He recovered quickly. Credit where credit was due, spinning back with a low kick aimed at her knee. Sarah lifted her leg, letting the kick pass underneath, and countered with a palm strike to his chest that made him stagger backward. The mess hall had become a coliseum. Soldiers were standing on chairs now, craning for a better view. The lieutenant had given up trying to intervene and was just staring, jaw hanging open. In the kitchen, cooks had stopped working, drawn out by the commotion. Tank came in again, this time with a combination jab cross hook, mixing up his angles using his training. Sarah blocked, parried, deflected her movements, minimal and efficient, expending a fraction of the energy Tank was burning. Stand still and fight, Tank roared, frustration mounting. Why would I do that? He feinted left and went right, trying to catch her off guard, but she read him like a book, stepping inside his range and delivering a quick strike to his solar plexus that made him grunt and back up, gasping for air. You're telegraphing everything, Sarah observed. Your shoulders drop before you punch, your weight shifts before you kick, your eyes focus on your target point. It's all very predictable. Tank's response was inarticulate rage. He rushed in with a tackle, using his size, trying to bring her to the ground where his weight advantage would matter. Sarah pivoted, grabbed his outstretched arm, and used a textbook judo throw that sent all 240 pounds of Navy SEAL crashing into a nearby table. The table collapsed under the impact with a tremendous crash. Trays went flying, coffee splattered across the floor. Tank lay in the wreckage for a moment, stunned, staring up at the fluorescent lights, trying to understand how this was happening. Around the hall, the reactions were mixed. Some soldiers looked shocked. Others, impressed, a few were grinning, enjoying the show. The younger Marines seemed split between loyalty to the legendary SEAL and amazement at what they were witnessing. Tank rolled to his feet, slower this time, favoring his left side where he'd hit the table. His uniform was stained with coffee, his hair disheveled, but the fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed. If anything, it had intensified, burning past reason into pure primitive need to dominate. I'm going to break you, he promised, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. I'm going to make you wish you'd never set foot on this base. You're going to get yourself court-martialed, Sarah replied, but I don't think you can stop now, can you? Your pride won't let you. She was right, and everyone in that mess hall knew it. Tank had crossed the point of no return. Winning or losing didn't matter anymore at this point, only the fight itself, only the desperate need to reclaim his shattered ego through violence. He came at her again, and this time there was no technique, No training, just raw aggression. He threw wild punches, kicks, tried to grab and throw her, used every dirty trick he'd learned in a decade of combat. Sarah defended against all of it, her breathing steady, her movements precise, making Tank work for every inch while expending minimal effort herself. And that's when Tank made his final fatal mistake. In his rage and humiliation, he forgot the most basic rule of combat: control your emotions or they'll control you. He overextended on a punch, left himself open, and Sarah didn't waste the opportunity. She stepped in close inside his guard and delivered a precise strike to his neck, hitting the vagus nerve cluster with exactly the right amount of force. Tank's eyes went wide, his body locked up, and then his knees buckled. He tried to stay standing, tried to fight through it, but his body wasn't listening to him anymore. His vision tunneled, sounds became distant and muffled. And the last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Sarah's face, calm and professional, not even breathing hard. Staff Sergeant Marcus Tank Rodriguez, decorated Navy SEAL combat veteran, legend of Camp Lejeune, collapsed face first onto the mess hall floor in front of 1,040 witnesses. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah stood over Tank's unconscious form, her expression unreadable. She wasn't gloating, wasn't celebrating, wasn't showing any emotion at all. She simply stood there waiting as the lieutenant finally found his legs and rushed over, followed by two MPs who'd apparently been summoned during the fight. "Is he?" the lieutenant started. "He's fine," Sarah said calmly. "He'll wake up in about 30 seconds with a headache and a bruised ego. Nothing permanent." "Who the hell are you?" one of the MPs asked, his hand on his sidearm, not threatening but ready, uncertain how to process what he'd just witnessed. Sarah reached into her jacket pocket, moving slowly and deliberately, and pulled out a badge. The MP's eyes went wide when he saw it. "Defense Intelligence Agency," Sarah said. "Senior Field Operative Chen. I'm here conducting a security review of Special Operations personnel. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez just failed his portion of the assessment, rather spectacularly." The MP swallowed hard. "Ma'am, should we secure him when he wakes up? I'll need to file a full report on this incident, including witness statements." She looked around the mess hall at all the shocked faces, all the phones that had been recording all the soldiers who would be telling this story for years to come. "I don't think witness availability will be a problem." On the floor, Tank groaned, consciousness returning. His eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to memory, memory giving way to horror as he realized where he was, what had happened, who was standing over him. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Sarah said formally, her voice carrying to every corner of the now silent mess hall. "You are being placed under investigation for assault on a federal agent, conduct unbecoming abuse of authority, and violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice Articles 128, 133, and 134. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise that right." Tank tried to sit up, tried to speak, but one of the MPs gently but firmly kept him down. "Stay down, Staff Sergeant. Medical's on the way." "This can't be happening," Tank muttered, his voice cracking. "I'm a SEAL. I'm protected. You're in a lot of trouble," Sarah finished for him. She turned to address the entire mess hall, her voice clear and commanding. "Let me be very clear about what you all just witnessed. This wasn't about me being stronger or tougher than Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. This was about him making a series of catastrophically poor decisions based on ego entitlement and a fundamental misunderstanding of what strength actually means." She paused, making eye contact with several of the younger soldiers who were staring at her with something approaching awe. Being a Navy SEAL is an incredible achievement. The training is brutal, the missions are dangerous, and the men who earn that trident deserve respect. But that respect is not a blank check. It doesn't give you the right to assault people. It doesn't make you invincible. And it certainly doesn't make you better than everyone else. Tank was being helped to his feet now by the MPs, his legs unsteady, his face a mask of devastation. The man who had walked into this mess hall 30 minutes ago, confident and commanding, was gone. In his place was someone smaller, diminished, broken. "True strength," Sarah continued, "is knowing when not to fight. True confidence doesn't need constant validation. True leadership doesn't require intimidation." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez forgot those lessons, and now he's going to pay the price for that failure. She looked directly at Tank, and her voice softened slightly, though her words remained sharp. "You were given every opportunity to walk away. I gave you chances, I gave you warnings, I gave you a way out, but your ego wouldn't let you take it. That's not my failure, that's yours." Tank's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. What could he say? What defense could he possibly offer with the entire incident on video with 1,000 witnesses with his own actions condemning him more thoroughly than any prosecutor ever could? As the MPs led him toward the exit, Tank made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of his career. "I'm a Navy SEAL," he shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. "I'm a goddamn Navy SEAL. That has to mean something. That has to, son. It means you were held to a higher standard," Sarah said quietly, "and you failed to meet it." The mess hall doors closed behind Tank with a hollow thud that sounded like a coffin lid dropping. In the silence that followed, Sarah gathered her papers, straightened her jacket, and prepared to leave as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But before she could take more than 2 steps, a young private first class, couldn't have been more than 20 years old, stood up from his table, came to attention, and saluted her. Then another soldier stood and saluted. Then another. Within seconds, every single person in that mess hall was on their feet, standing at attention, saluting not because they had to, but because they wanted to, showing respect to someone who had just taught them all a lesson they'd never forget. Sarah stood there for a moment, then returned the salute with crisp precision. "Carry on," she said simply, and walked out of the mess hall into the bright North Carolina afternoon, leaving behind a room full of soldiers who would never look at strength, confidence, or respect quite the same way again. The medical team arrived 3 minutes after Tank hit the floor. 2 corpsmen rushed through the mess hall doors with a stretcher, their boots squeaking on the linoleum, faces tight with urgency. They'd been told a SEAL was down, which usually meant something catastrophic, an accident in training, a vehicle rollover, something that required immediate extraction and trauma care. What they found instead was Tank sitting on the floor, conscious but dazed, with 2 MPs standing over him and a woman calmly collecting her papers at a nearby table. "What happened here?" the lead corpsman asked, kneeling beside Tank, checking his pupils with a penlight. "He got knocked out," one of the MPs said flatly. "By what explosion fall?" "By her." The MP nodded towards Sarah. The corpsman's head whipped around so fast he nearly dropped his penlight. "By who?" "The lady. She put him down in about 5 seconds. Tank groaned, swatting away the penlight. "Get that out of my face. I'm fine." "Staff Sergeant, you were unconscious. We need to check you for—" "I said, I'm fine." Tank's voice cracked on the last word, and everyone heard it, that raw edge of desperation. He tried to stand, but his legs weren't cooperating yet, trembling like a newborn calf's. The humiliation of it, needing help to stand after being dropped by a woman half his size, was written all over his face. Sarah closed her folder with a soft snap that somehow carried across the entire silent mess hall. "He'll be okay physically. Vagus nerve strike causes temporary incapacitation, nothing permanent, though I'd recommend a CT scan to rule out concussion from the fall." "Ma'am, are you medical personnel?" "Defense Intelligence at Army. I'm trained in combat medicine, among other things." She showed her badge again, and the corpsman's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something approaching fear. Oh, shit." "Indeed," Sarah's tone was dry. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez will need to be medically cleared before he can be processed for his investigation. Make sure that happens." Tank finally managed to get to his feet with help from the MPs swaying slightly. His eyes found Sarah across the mess hall, and the look he gave her was pure venom mixed with disbelief. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is," Sarah replied, "but you're welcome to keep making it worse for yourself if that's what you need to do." One of the MPs, a sergeant named Williams, who'd been at Camp Lejeune for 6 years and had seen Tank operate during all of them, cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, I need you to come with us. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder," Tank's laugh was bitter, broken. "You know what's hard? Having your entire career destroyed in front of 1,000 people because some DIA spook decided to play games." "I didn't play games," Sarah said quietly. "You grabbed me, you threatened me, you attacked me. I defended myself. Those are facts, not games." "Facts," Tank spat the word like it was poison. "The fact is you came in here looking for trouble. You wanted this to happen. You set me up." The accusation hung in the air for a moment before Sarah responded, her voice colder now, professional detachment giving way to something harder. "I set you up by sitting alone minding my own business. I set you up by asking you to leave me alone. I set you up by giving you multiple chances to walk away. Is that your defense, that you're so lacking in self-control that a woman simply existing in your vicinity is a trap?" Several soldiers in the mess hall shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded. Tank's face went from red to purple. "You disrespected me," he said, his voice shaking. You disrespected a Navy SEAL in front of my men. What did you think was going to happen? I thought you'd act like a professional. Clearly, that was expecting too much. Sergeant Williams put a hand on Tank's arm, gentle but firm. Come on, Staff Sergeant. Let's go. But Tank jerked away, his control completely shattered. Oh, everything he'd been holding back spilling out in a torrent of rage and wounded pride. No, everyone needs to hear this. This woman comes onto our base, into our mess hall, and she deliberately provokes me, challenges me, disrespects everything I've worked for. And when I respond, when I stand up for myself, and for every operator who's ever put on this uniform, she uses some cheap trick to make me look bad. Cheap trick, Sarah repeated. Is that what we're calling proper technique now? You sucker punched me. You caught me off guard. In a real fight, a fair fight, I'd destroy you. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did, a flash of something that made even the MPs take a step back. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, do you understand what's happening right now? Do you comprehend the situation you're in? I understand that you're trying to ruin me because you've got some kind of agenda, some vendetta against special operations, and you picked me as your target. I picked you. Sarah's voice was very soft now, very dangerous. You're standing there in front of all these witnesses with multiple cameras, having recorded everything, and you genuinely believe that I'm the aggressor in this situation. That level of delusion is actually fascinating from a psychological standpoint. I'm not delusional, I know what I saw, I know what happened. Then let's review what happened, shall we? For everyone here who might be unclear. Sarah pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons, and suddenly the mess hall's TV screen, normally used for announcements and sports, flickered to life. Tank's face went white. What are you? Camp Lejeune has security cameras everywhere, Staff Sergeant, including in this mess hall. Let's watch together. The footage began playing crystal clear from an angle that captured everything. There was Sarah sitting alone working. There, a Tank approaching with that confident swagger. The entire interaction played out in high definition, every word audible through the mess hall speaker system. Watching it back was somehow worse than living through it. Tank's aggression, his escalation, his grabbing of Sarah's arm, it all looked exactly as bad as it had felt. And Sarah's responses, calm and measured, and giving him every opportunity to back down, made it impossible to argue she'd provoked anything. When the footage reached the point where Tank charged at her, several soldiers in the audience winced. When it showed Sarah putting him down with clinical precision, someone whispered, "Holy shit," loud enough for everyone to hear. The video ended with Tank unconscious on the floor and Sarah standing over him, not celebrating, not gloating, just waiting. The silence that followed was crushing. That's what happened, Sarah said, pocketing her phone. No tricks, no setup, no agenda, just you making a series of terrible choices and facing the consequences. Tank was staring at the now blank screen, his face ashen. Seeing it from the outside, watching himself like a stranger, had apparently penetrated his defenses in a way words never could. I didn't mean... What didn't you mean? You didn't mean to grab me, you didn't mean to threaten me, you didn't mean to attack me. Which part was accidental? I was angry, you made me angry. I made you angry by existing and not being sufficiently impressed by your credentials. That's what you're saying. Tank's hands were shaking now. Whether from adrenaline crash or psychological breakdown, or both, nobody could tell. You don't understand what it's like. Being a SEAL, everyone expects you to be perfect, to be strong, to be in control all the time. You can't show weakness. You can't let anyone disrespect you, or they'll think you're weak, and if they think you're weak, then everything you've accomplished doesn't matter. For the first time since the confrontation began, Sarah's expression softened slightly. That sounds exhausting. It is, Tank said, and suddenly he wasn't the legendary Staff Sergeant Rodriguez anymore. He was just a man who was tired and scared and watching his life fall apart in real time. It's exhausting and it never stops, and you can't ever let your guard down, because the second you do, someone's there ready to tear you down. So instead, you tear others down first. The observation landed like a physical blow. Tank flinched. That's not... It is, though. How many people have you treated the way you tried to treat me? How many soldiers under your command have been on the receiving end of this behavior? How many times have you used your rank, your reputation, your size to intimidate people into submission because it made you feel powerful? Tank didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Around the mess hall, some of the younger soldiers were exchanging glances, having conversations with their eyes, remembering incidents, comparing notes. Sarah pressed forward, not cruel but relentless. This is what's going to happen now. An investigation will be opened into your conduct, not just today, but throughout your career. Every complaint that was filed and buried, every incident that was swept under the rug. Because you're a valuable operator, every person you have bullied or threatened or assaulted, it's all going to come to light. And you're going to have to face it. They'll bury it, Tank said, but he didn't sound convinced. The teams protect their own. They won't let one incident destroy. This isn't one incident. This is a pattern of behavior that got caught on camera in a way that can't be ignored or explained away. And the teams don't protect abusers, they protect the integrity of the unit. You've become a liability. The truth of it was written on every face in the mess hall. The other SEALs present, 3 of them scattered among the crowd, weren't rushing to Tank's defense. They were watching with grim expressions, already distancing themselves from the fallout. Sergeant Williams tried again, his voice gentle, despite the situation. Staff Sergeant, we really need to go now. You need medical clearance, and then we need to process you. Fighting this isn't going to help. Tank looked around the mess hall at all the faces staring back at him, and something inside him finally broke. His shoulders slumped, his head dropped, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Everyone's looking at me. Yes, Sarah agreed. They're all going to remember this. Every person in this room is going to tell this story. It's going to spread through the entire base, the entire community. By tomorrow, everyone's going to know that Tank Rodriguez got put down by a woman. Is that what bothers you most? Not that you assaulted someone, but that you lost? Tank's head snapped up, anger flashing again, but it died quickly, replaced by something worse. Resignation. Does it matter? Either way, I'm finished. You're finished because of your own actions, not because of who stopped you. Take responsibility for that, at least. The MPs finally managed to get Tank moving toward the door, each holding one of his arms, not restraining him exactly, but guiding him, making sure he didn't do anything else stupid. As they passed, Sarah Tank stopped, forcing them to stop with him. Why he asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. Why didn't you just let me leave when I wanted to keep talking? Why didn't you just ignore me? Why did you have to push back? Sarah considered the question for a long moment before answering. Because men like you need to be pushed back against. Because every time someone doesn't, you get bolder, more entitled, more dangerous. Because somewhere on this base, there's a young female soldier who's dealing with someone like you, someone who thinks his rank or his training or his gender gives him the right to do whatever he wants, and she needs to know that she can fight back, that she should fight back. Tank's eyes welled up, and he blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall in front of all these people. I have kids, he said suddenly, 2 daughters. What am I going to tell them? Tell them the truth. Tell them their father made mistakes and he's facing the consequences. Tell them that's what integrity looks like. They're going to hate me. Maybe. Or maybe you'll use this as an opportunity to become the kind of man they can actually respect, instead of the kind of man who demands respect he hasn't earned. The MPs pulled Tank away then, and he didn't resist this time, letting himself be led out of the mess hall like a prisoner being taken to execution. The doors closed behind him with that same hollow finality, and suddenly Sarah was alone in a room full of strangers who were all staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to fear to gratitude. A female lance corporal, sitting 3 tables away, stood up abruptly. Her hands were shaking. Thank you. Sarah turned to look at her. For what? For fighting back. For not letting him get away with it. The lance corporal's voice cracked. He did the same thing to me 6 months ago. Not as bad, he didn't hit me, but he grabbed me, he threatened me, he made me feel like I was nothing. And when I tried to report it, I was told I was being too sensitive, that Tank was just intense, that I needed to toughen up if I wanted to make it in the military. The mess hall, which had started to return to normal conversation levels, went silent again. All eyes were on the lance corporal now, and she seemed to shrink under the attention before forcing herself to stand straighter. What's your name? Sarah asked gently. Martinez, Lance Corporal Jennifer Martinez. When this investigation opens, I want you to submit a formal statement about what happened to you. Can you do that? Martinez nodded, tears streaming down her face now. Will it matter? Will anyone actually listen? They'll listen. I'll make sure they listen. A male voice from the back of the hall spoke up. He did something similar to my sister. She was a Navy cook here 2 years ago. He cornered her in the supply room, got aggressive when she turned him down. She transferred to another base to get away from him. Another voice. He threatened me when I beat him in a training exercise. Said if I ever made him look bad again, he'd make sure I never made rank. Another. He stole credit for a mission plan I developed. When I confronted him, he told me I should be grateful he even let me be on his team. The stories came pouring out a dam, breaking years of suppressed complaints and buried incidents spilling into the open now that someone had finally stood up to the untouchable Tank Rodriguez. Sarah listened to all of them, taking notes on her phone, collecting names and dates and details. By the time the account stopped, she had documentation of 17 separate incidents spanning 5 years. 17 people who had been hurt, threatened, bullied, or abused by a man who thought his SEAL trident made him invincible. This is going to be bigger than I thought, Sarah said quietly, scrolling through her notes. A master sergeant older than most of the soldiers present approached her table. He'd been sitting quietly in the corner the whole time, watching everything unfold. Ma'am, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Did you know when you sat down here this morning, when Rodriguez approached you, did you know what he was? Sarah met his eyes steadily. I knew exactly what he was. That's why I was here. The master sergeant absorbed this, nodding slowly. So, this was a setup. Not the kind he was claiming, but still. You were hunting him. I was investigating complaints about special operations personnel abusing their authority. Rodriguez's name came up repeatedly. I came here to observe him in a natural environment to see if the reports were accurate. He provided all the evidence I needed within 30 minutes of contact. That's cold. That's my job. And before you judge me too harshly, Master Sergeant, remember that every person who just shared their story came to someone like you first. They reported what happened to them through proper channels, and nothing was done. So yes, I set up an opportunity for Rodriguez to reveal his true character. But he's the one who chose to grab me. He's the one who chose to escalate. He's the one who chose violence. I just gave him the rope. The Master Sergeant was quiet for a long moment. You're right, we failed them. We protected the operator at the expense of the people he hurt. That's on us. It's on all of us, Sarah corrected. This kind of culture doesn't develop in a vacuum. It requires complicity, silence, looking the other way, because it's easier than confronting someone with power and reputation. From across the room, a young private raised his hand like he was in a classroom. Sarah almost smiled at the gesture. Yes. Ma'am, that thing you did, the nerve strike that knocked him out, can you teach us that? No. Why not? Because techniques like that aren't toys. They're not party tricks. They're potentially lethal force options that should only be used in genuine self-defense situations. Teaching them to soldiers who might use them inappropriately would make me complicit in future abuse. The private looked disappointed but nodded. That makes sense, I guess. It's just everyone here has been taught that bigger and stronger always wins. Seeing someone your size take down someone his size using technique instead of strength, it makes you think maybe there's hope for the rest of us. Sarah's expression softened. There's always hope, but real strength isn't about being able to hurt people. It's about knowing when not to. Rodriguez has probably forgotten more hand-to-hand combat techniques than most people will ever learn. But all that training was useless because he couldn't control himself. He let his ego make his decisions. A female sergeant sitting near Martinez spoke up. So what happens now? To all of us, I mean. We just witnessed a DIA investigation unfold. We're all going to be called as witnesses. This is going to consume weeks of our lives. Probably, Sarah admitted. And I'm sorry for that, but it's necessary. If we want to change the culture that allowed Rodriguez to operate with impunity for years, we need to be thorough. We need to document everything, talk to everyone, build a case so airtight that it can't be dismissed or minimized. And Rodriguez, what happens to him? Sarah closed her folder, her expression unreadable. That depends on what the investigation uncovers. At minimum, he's looking at assault charges, conduct unbecoming possible discharge. At maximum, if we find evidence of more serious crimes, he could face military prison time. The mess hall absorbed this information in silence. Despite everything they just witnessed, despite all the stories they just heard, the idea of Tank Rodriguez, the legend, actually facing serious consequences was hard to process. He's been here forever, someone said quietly. It's weird to think he might just be gone. He should have thought about that before he decided his reputation was more important than other people's safety. Sarah replied. She stood gathering her things. If anyone else has information relevant to this investigation, you can reach me through your chain of command. Don't be afraid to come forward. You're not betraying anyone by telling the truth. She started toward the exit, and the path cleared before her, automatically soldiers stepping aside, many of them still processing what they'd witnessed. She was almost to the door when Martinez called out, Ma'am, what you said to him about his daughters, about becoming someone they could respect. Do you think that's possible? Do you think people like him can actually change? Sarah paused her hand on the door. I think change is possible for anyone who genuinely wants it and is willing to do the hard work. But Rodriguez has spent years building his identity around being tough, being dominant, being feared. Tearing that down and building something better in its place would require him to admit he was wrong about fundamental things he's believed his whole adult life. Most people aren't capable of that kind of self-examination. But some are. Some are. I hope for his daughter's sake that he's one of them. But I'm not optimistic. She pushed through the door and was gone, leaving behind a mess hall full of soldiers who were suddenly very aware of how much was about to change. Martinez was still standing when the door closed behind Sarah, her face wet with tears. She hadn't realized she was crying. The mess hall remained frozen, nobody quite sure what to do now that the storm had passed. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it out with shaking hands and stared at the screen, her face going pale. "What is it?" asked the sergeant sitting next to her. Martinez showed her the phone, baby. It was a text from an unknown number. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Tank has friends, powerful friends. Watch your back." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "Screenshot that right now and send it to the DIA agent. That's witness intimidation." "I can't." Martinez's voice was barely a whisper. "You don't understand. It's not just Tank. It's the whole system. His team guys, his commanding officers, people who've been covering for him for years. They're not going to let this investigation happen quietly." Before anyone could respond, 3 more phones buzzed simultaneously around the mess hall. Different soldiers, different tables, but the same basic message. Stay quiet. Don't talk to investigators. Remember where your loyalties lie. A corporal named Davies stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loud in the tense silence. "This is insane. They're threatening us. They're threatening witnesses to a federal investigation." "They're protecting their own," the master sergeant said grimly, "like they always do." Davies pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. "Well, I'm forwarding this to that DIA agent right now. Let's see how they like having evidence of obstruction of justice." "Don't!" Martinez grabbed his arm. "Please, you don't know what they're capable of." "I know exactly what they're capable of. That's why we need to fight back." Martinez's face crumpled. "Easy for you to say. You're a man. You're 6 feet tall. When they come after you, it'll be professional retaliation, bad assignments, block promotions. When they come after me..." She couldn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. The female sergeant put her arm around Martinez. "Then we stick together. All of us who gave statements, we watch each other's backs. Against Navy SEALs, against their entire command structure. Against whoever we have to." A voice from the back of the hall cut through the tension. "You're all being dramatic. Tank screwed up. He'll face some consequences. But this whole investigation thing will blow over in a few weeks. It always does." Every head turned to look at the speaker. It was a lieutenant, mid-30s SEAL trident on his chest, sitting with 2 other team guys who'd been silent throughout the entire incident. Martinez recognized him. Lieutenant Brad Coulson, one of Tank's closest friends, part of the same tight-knit group that had run Camp Lejeune's special operations community for years. "Blow over," Davies' voice was incredulous. "A DIA agent just put your boy on the ground in front of 1,000 people, and you think this is going to blow over?" Coulson smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think a lot of things can happen in the next few weeks. Witnesses can change their stories. Evidence can be misplaced. People can decide that maybe they misunderstood what they saw." "Are you seriously threatening everyone in this room right now?" "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just pointing out reality. The teams take care of their own, always have, always will, and Rodriguez, for all his faults, is one of ours. That means something." The master sergeant stood up, his voice carrying command authority. "Lieutenant, I strongly suggest you stop talking right now before you add yourself to the list of people being investigated." "For what? Having a conversation, expressing my opinion?" Coulson's smile widened. "See, that's the problem with you support guys. You don't understand how things really work. Tank made one mistake, got caught on a bad day, and now everyone wants to crucify him. But where's the loyalty? Where's the brotherhood? Brotherhood doesn't mean covering for abusers." Martinez said, her voice stronger now, anger burning through fear. Coulson turned his attention to her, and his expression shifted to something uglier. "Oh, right. You're the one who claimed Tank harassed you 6 months ago. How'd that investigation go? Oh, wait, it went nowhere because you couldn't prove anything. Funny how that works. Martinez flinched like she'd been slapped, but the sergeant next to her stood up, putting herself between Coulson and the younger woman. Back off, Lieutenant. Or what? You gonna knock me out too? Call your DI, a friend to save you. The mess hall was electric now, tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. Half the room looked ready to jump to Martinez's defense. The other half looked uncertain, caught between doing what was right and fear of repercussions. Then the door burst open and Sarah walked back in her phone in her hand, her expression cold enough to frost glass. Lieutenant Coulson, perfect timing. Coulson's smile faltered. Excuse me. I was just outside reviewing security footage from the hallway cameras when I noticed something interesting. Several soldiers received threatening text messages within minutes of this incident concluding. And based on cellular tower data, those messages originated from phones inside this room. She looked directly at Coulson. Want to guess whose phone pinged the tower at exactly the right times? The color drained from Coulson's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Really, because I have a federal warrant that will let me access your phone records within the hour. We can do this easy or hard, Lieutenant. Your choice. One of the other SEAL team members sitting with Coulson suddenly stood up and walked away from the table, deliberately distancing himself. The third followed immediately after. Coulson was alone in seconds, his backup evaporating like morning mist. You're bluffing, Coulson said, but his voice shook. MI test me. Send another threatening message right now and let's see what happens. Coulson's hand moved toward his pocket, then stopped. His face was a mask of barely controlled panic. This is entrapment. This is you committing crimes in real time while under observation by a federal agent. There's a difference. Sarah pulled out her own phone and made a call. This is Agent Chen. I need an MP team at the main mess hall immediately. I have a lieutenant who needs to be detained for witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. You can't do this. Coulson's voice cracked. I'm a Navy SEAL. I'm a commissioned officer. You don't have the authority. Actually, I have exactly the authority. And you just made the same mistake Rodriguez made, assuming your status would protect you from consequences. Sarah's voice was ice. It won't. The MPs arrived within 3 minutes, the same Sergeant Williams who'd escorted Tank earlier. His face when he saw Coulson was a mixture of resignation and disappointment. Sir, I need you to come with me. Coulson looked around the mess hall, desperately searching for support for backup, for anyone who would step in and save him. Every face that met his gaze looked away. Even his fellow team guys had abandoned ship. This is a witch hunt, Coulson said, his voice rising to a shout. You're targeting SEALs because you hate us, because you're jealous of what we accomplish, because you can't stand that we're better than everyone else. You're not better than everyone else, Sarah said quietly. You just convinced yourself you were, and that belief system allowed you to justify terrible behavior. Tank did it, you're doing it, and I'm willing to bet we're going to find more of you before this investigation is finished. Williams took Coulson's arm, gentle but firm. Come on, Lieutenant. Don't make this worse. But Coulson jerked away, his control completely gone now. Everything he'd been holding back exploding out. Worse? How could it be worse? My career is over. Tank's career is over. You're destroying lives over nothing. Over nothing, Martinez stood up again, her fear transformed into fury. You call what he did to me nothing. What he did to all of us, nothing. You should have been tougher. This is the military, not a daycare. If you can't handle some rough treatment, you don't belong here. The mess hall erupted, soldiers shouting some at Coulson, some at each other, years of frustration and anger, and buried trauma boiling over all at once. Williams called for backup on his radio, his voice barely audible over the chaos. Sarah didn't shout. She walked to the center of the room and just stood there, waiting, her presence somehow cutting through the noise. Gradually, the shouting died down, soldiers turning to look at her, waiting to see what would happen next. Everyone sit down, she said, and her voice carried despite its quietness. Right now. They sat. Even Coulson, though Williams kept a hand on his shoulder. What you're all feeling right now, this anger, this sense of injustice, this fear about what's going to happen next, this is normal. This is what happens when a broken system finally starts to crack. It's messy, and it's painful, and it feels like everything's falling apart. Sarah paused, making eye contact with people around the room. But it's necessary. Necessary to destroy careers, someone called out. Necessary to hold people accountable. There's a difference. Rodriguez didn't have his career destroyed by this investigation. He destroyed it himself through years of abuse and misconduct. Same with Coulson here, who just committed multiple felonies in front of witnesses because he thought he was untouchable. She turned to face Coulson directly. You want to know the saddest part? If you just kept your mouth shut, if you'd let this play out, you probably would have been fine. But your ego wouldn't let you, just like Tank's ego wouldn't let him. Coulson's face was gray. Now the reality of what he'd done finally sinking in. I was just trying to protect my friend. By threatening the people he hurt, that's not protection, that's complicity, and now you're going down with him. Williams finally got Coulson moving toward the door, the lieutenant stumbling like a drunk, his world collapsing around him. As they reached the exit, Coulson turned back one last time. How many of us are you going to take down? He asked, and he sounded genuinely curious, like he was asking about the weather. As many as necessary, Sarah replied. If that's 2, it's 2. If it's 20, it's 20. I'll keep going until I find the bottom of this rod. The door closed behind Coulson, and the mess hall fell into a heavy silence. People were staring at their phones now at the threatening messages they'd received, understanding that they were sitting on evidence of a conspiracy that apparently went deeper than anyone had realized. Davies broke the silence. How big is this really? Sarah considered her answer carefully. I don't know yet, but based on what I've seen in the last hour, I'd say we're looking at a systemic cultural problem within the special operations community at Camp Lejeune, maybe beyond. Beyond, the master sergeant leaned forward. You think this extends past this base? I think cultures like this don't develop in isolation. I think when you have groups of people who are told they're elite, who are given immense power and authority, who operate with minimal oversight, you create conditions where abuse can flourish. And I think the SEAL community, for all its genuine accomplishments and heroism, has some of those conditions. A young petty officer who'd been quiet throughout everything finally spoke up. I'm trying to become a SEAL. I've been training for 2 years. Are you saying I shouldn't? I'm saying you should go in with your eyes open. Being a SEAL is an incredible achievement, and most of the men who earn that trident are genuinely good people who serve with honor. But some aren't. And the culture has protected those bad actors for too long, which has enabled them to hurt people and damage the reputation of everyone else. So what do? You be better. You speak up when you see wrong being done. You remember that the trident doesn't give you the right to treat people as less than human. You build a better culture than the one that created Rodriguez and Coulson. The petty officer nodded, slowly processing this. Around the room, others were having similar moments of reckoning, questioning things they'd accepted without examination for years. Martinez's phone buzzed again and she flinched before checking it. Her face transformed from fear to relief. It's the DIA number, Agent Chen's official contact information in a secure way to submit evidence. I'm sending it to everyone who gave statements earlier, Sarah confirmed, looking at her own phone. And I'm including instructions on how to document any further intimidation attempts. If anyone else gets threatened, I want to know immediately. What if the threats don't come through text? Someone asked. What if it's verbal or physical or just subtle retaliation? Document everything. Keep journals, save emails, screenshot conversations, record interactions. If you're in a one-party consent state, build your own evidence file. Don't rely on the system to protect you, protect yourself. A female private raised her hand hesitantly. What if we're too scared to report? What if we just want this to go away? Sarah's expression softened. Then I can't force you, but I want you to understand something. Every person who stays silent, who decides not to come forward, who lets fear keep them from speaking truth, that silence enables the next victim. Someone else will be grabbed, threatened, assaulted, because the people doing it know they can get away with it. That's not fair, the private said, tears in her eyes. That's not fair to put that responsibility on victims. You're right, it's not fair. None of this is fair. But it's reality. Change only happens when people are brave enough to demand it, even when that bravery comes at personal cost. The mess hall absorbed this hard truth in silence. Then Martinez stood up again, wiping her eyes, her jaw set with determination. I'm scared. I'm terrified. But I'm going to give a full statement anyway. Because Agent Chen is right. If I don't, someone else is going to go through what I went through. And I can't live with that. Me too, said Davies. And me, added the female sergeant. One by one, voices around the room echoed the sentiment. Not everyone. Some people were still too afraid, too uncertain, too worried about the consequences. But enough. More than enough to build a case. Sarah watched them commit, watched them choose courage over comfort, and something in her expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Thank you, all of you. What you're doing takes real bravery. Bravery, Martinez repeated with a bitter laugh. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's what bravery actually feels like. It's not the absence of fear, it's action despite fear. A gunnery sergeant who'd been sitting quietly in the corner finally spoke up, his voice rough with age and experience. I've been at Lejeune for 15 years. I've seen a lot of stuff get swept under the rug, a lot of complaints disappear, a lot of good people driven out because they wouldn't stay quiet. This investigation you're doing, is it actually going to be different? Or are we all going to put ourselves on the line just to watch nothing change? It was the question everyone wanted to ask but was afraid to voice. Sarah met the gunnery sergeant's eyes steadily. I can't promise you it'll be easy. I can't promise there won't be retaliation attempts. I can't even promise that everyone who deserves to face consequences will. But I can promise you this. I will pursue this investigation with everything I have. I will document every piece of evidence. I will interview every witness. I will build a case so thorough, so detailed, so ironclad that it cannot be ignored or buried or explained away. And if people try to obstruct me like Coulson just did, I will add them to the list of people being investigated. I don't care how many tridents I have to go through. The gunnery sergeant studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I believe you, and I've got some stories of my own to share. Things I saw Rodriguez do 3 years ago that never got properly reported. I want to hear all of it, Sarah said. But not here, not now. This needs to be done formally with proper documentation. I'll be setting up interview rooms tomorrow morning. Anyone who wants to give a statement can sign up through the secure portal I'm sending out. Her phone rang and she glanced at the caller ID before answering. Chen here. She listened for a moment, her expression darkening. When how many, I'll be right there. She hung up and looked around the mess hall, and everyone could tell the news wasn't good. What happened? Martinez asked. That was base security. About 20 minutes ago, someone attempted to access the secure server where security footage from this mess hall is stored. They used stolen credentials and tried to delete files related to today's incident. The room went cold. Did they succeed? The master sergeant asked. No, we had multiple redundant backups specifically because I anticipated something like this. But the attempt was sophisticated, which means we're dealing with someone who has technical skills and access to classified systems. Another SEAL, or someone helping them. The investigation just expanded. Sarah headed for the door, then paused. Everyone stay alert. Watch your backs. And if anything unusual happens, anything at all, contact me immediately. We're past the point of isolated incidents. This is coordinated. She left and the mess hall erupted into worried conversation. Martinez sank back into her chair, her earlier determination wavering in the face of this new threat. They're going to come after all of us, she whispered. They're going to destroy us for speaking up. The female sergeant gripped her shoulder. Then we fight back harder. We document everything, we stay together, and we don't let them scare us into silence. Easy to say. Easy to say, hard to do, I know. But what's the alternative? Let them win. Let Rodriguez and Coulson and whoever else is involved just continue destroying lives. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and opened the secure portal Sarah had sent. No, I'm done being scared. I'm done letting them have power over me. She started typing, her fingers shaking but determined. I'm writing down everything that happened 6 months ago. Every detail I can remember. Every witness who might have seen something. Everything. Around the room, others were doing the same, phones out, typing statements, uploading evidence, choosing to fight back in the only way they could. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, just ordinary people making the difficult choice to stand up against power. Davies looked at his phone at the threatening message still displayed on the screen, and a thought occurred to him. You know what's crazy? Whoever sent these threats probably thought they were protecting the teams, protecting their brothers. They probably think they're the good guys in this story. The master sergeant snorted. That's how it always works. Nobody thinks they're the villain. Rodriguez probably thinks he's the victim here being persecuted for being strong and demanding respect. Coulson probably thinks he's being loyal to a friend. The person who tried to delete the footage probably thinks they're preventing an injustice. How do people get that twisted? By surrounding themselves with people who reinforce their worldview. By never being challenged. By being told they're special for so long, they start to believe the rules don't apply to them. He paused. By being in a culture that values loyalty over truth. The words hung heavy in the air, an indictment of everything many of them had been taught since joining the military. Loyalty to your team, to your unit, to your brothers in arms, it was supposed to be absolute, unquestionable, sacred. But what happened when that loyalty protected monsters? The question was still echoing in everyone's mind when Tank's wife showed up. She came through the mess hall doors like a force of nature, her face streaked with tears and rage, her hands shaking as she pointed at Martinez. This is your fault. You destroyed my family. Every head turned. Martinez went pale, frozen in her seat, as this woman she'd never met advanced on her like a missile locked on target. Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to calm down, the master sergeant said, standing up, putting himself between the two women. Calm down. My husband just called me from the MP station. He's being charged with assault. He's losing his career, his reputation, everything we've built for 15 years. And it's because of her. She jabbed a finger past the master sergeant at Martinez. Because she couldn't handle a little attention, because she's too weak to be in the military. Martinez found her voice, though it trembled. Your husband grabbed me. He threatened me. He assaulted a federal agent. I didn't make him do any of that. You provoked him. You must have. Marcus doesn't just attack people for no reason. He's a hero. He's saved lives. He's risked everything for this country. The female sergeant stepped up beside Martinez, protective. Ma'am, with all due respect, you weren't there. You didn't see what happened. I don't need to see it. I know my husband. I know what he's capable of. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the anger. We have 2 daughters. What am I supposed to tell them? That their father is a criminal? That everything they thought about him was a lie? Maybe you tell them the truth, Davies said quietly, that their father made serious mistakes and has to face the consequences. Mrs. Rodriguez whirled on him. Who asked you? You don't know what it's like. You don't know what we've sacrificed, every deployment, every mission, wondering if he was going to come home, living with the nightmares, the anger, the trauma. I've held that man together for years while he served this country, and this is how he gets repaid. By being held accountable for assault. Martinez's voice was stronger now, anger pushing through fear. Yes, that's exactly how he should be repaid for that. You have no idea what he's been through. What he's seen. Combat changes people. It breaks them and rebuilds them into something harder, something necessary. You can't judge him by normal standards. The master sergeant's voice cut through sharp and clear. Ma'am, I've done 3 combat tours myself. I've seen things that still give me nightmares. And I've never once grabbed a subordinate, threatened them, or assaulted anyone. Combat trauma is real, but it's not a blank check for abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez's face crumpled, the anger collapsing into grief. He's going to lose everything. Our house, his pension, his identity. What's he supposed to do? Who's he supposed to be without the teams? That's something he should have thought about before he decided his ego was more important than other people's safety. The female sergeant said, not unkindly. I'm sorry for what you're going through, I really am. But your pain doesn't erase what he did to others. Others? Mrs. Rodriguez laughed, bitter and broken. How many others? How many people are coming forward to destroy him? 17 so far, Martinez said quietly. 17 people with stories about your husband abusing his power. And that's just in the first hour. The number hit Mrs. Rodriguez like a physical blow. She staggered, catching herself on a nearby table. 17. That's not possible. That's not the man I married. Maybe it's not the man you thought you married, the gunnery sergeant said gently. Or maybe it's a side of him you never saw because you weren't his subordinate. You weren't someone he had power over. Mrs. Rodriguez was shaking her head, refusing to accept it, clinging to the image of her husband she'd constructed over 15 years. No, there has to be an explanation. Maybe they're lying. Maybe they're exaggerating. Maybe they all got together and coordinated their stories to take him down. Why would we do that? Martinez asked, genuine curiosity in her voice despite the tension. What would we gain from lying about this? I don't know, attention, sympathy. Maybe you're anti-military, anti-SEAL, anti-men. There are people out there who hate what my husband represents. Davies stood up slowly, his voice calm but firm. Ma'am, I'm a Marine. I've wanted to be a SEAL since I was 12 years old. I respect the hell out of what your husband accomplished in training and in combat, but respect for his achievements doesn't mean I have to ignore or excuse his abuse of others. Those are separate things. Mrs. Rodriguez looked around the mess hall at all these faces, these strangers who were tearing her world apart, and something inside her finally broke. She sank into a chair, put her face in her hands, and sobbed. Not angry tears anymore, but the deep, wrenching sobs of someone whose entire reality was shattering. I don't know what to do, she whispered through her hands. I don't know how to fix this. Martinez surprised everyone by getting up and moving to sit next to Mrs. Rodriguez. Not touching her, not offering false comfort, just being present. You can't fix this. It's not yours to fix. Your husband did this, and only he can make it right. How? How does he make 17 victims right? How does he come back from this? Maybe he doesn't come back. Maybe this is the end of who he was, and he has to figure out who he's going to be now. Mrs. Rodriguez looked up, her face ravaged by tears. You're the one he hurt 6 months ago. The one who tried to report him? Yes. And you're sitting here talking to me, the wife of the man who hurt you, trying to help me understand this. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for your daughters. They're about to learn some really hard truths about their father, and they're going to need their mother to be strong and honest with them. Not defensive, not in denial, honest. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at Martinez for a long moment. You're braver than I am. I doubt that. You married a man who deploys into combat zones. You've spent 15 years wondering if he'd come home. That takes a different kind of bravery. Martinez paused. But bravery comes in a lot of forms. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you were wrong about someone you love. The mess hall doors opened again, and Sarah walked back in her expression grim. She stopped when she saw Mrs. Rodriguez's recognition flickering across her face. Mrs. Rodriguez, I wasn't expecting you here. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, wiping her face, trying to pull herself together. I needed to see the people who are destroying my husband. Your husband destroyed himself. These people are just refusing to let him get away with it anymore. So I've been told? Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was hollow now, all the fight gone out of her. Can I see him? Can I talk to him? Not yet. He's being processed, and then he'll be held pending his arraignment. You'll be able to see him after that, probably tomorrow. What's going to happen to him? Sarah's expression softened slightly. That depends on a lot of factors. The evidence, his cooperation, whether he shows genuine remorse, what the investigation uncovers. But I won't lie to you, Mrs. Rodriguez. He's facing serious charges. At minimum, he's looking at a dishonorable discharge and possibly prison time. Mrs. Rodriguez swayed on her feet, and the female sergeant quickly grabbed her arm to steady her. Prison. My husband in prison. He assaulted a federal agent in front of 1,000 witnesses after a pattern of abuse spanning years. Yes, prison is a very real possibility. He has daughters. They need their father. They needed a father who didn't abuse his power and hurt people. Unfortunately, that's not the father they got. Sarah's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. I'm sorry for what your family is going through. I genuinely am. But my priority is stopping your husband from hurting anyone else and holding him accountable for the people he's already hurt. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded numbly. I understand. I hate it, but I understand. She turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Martinez. The story you're going to tell about what he did to you 6 months ago. Will you tell the truth? Not an exaggerated version, not making it worse than it was, just the truth. Martinez met her eyes steadily. I've only ever told the truth. Nobody believed me, but I never lied. Okay. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice was barely audible. Okay. She left, and the silence she left behind was heavier than before. Watching her walk away broken and grieving for a life that was ending made the whole situation feel more real, more consequential. I feel bad for her, Martinez said quietly. Is that weird? She came in here attacking me, and I feel bad for her. It's not weird, the female sergeant replied. She's a victim too, in a different way. Victim of his lies, his double life, his ability to be one person at home and someone completely different at work. Sarah checked her phone and swore under her breath. The server hack attempt is worse than I thought. Whoever tried to delete the footage also attempted to access personnel files, disciplinary records, and complaint logs. They were trying to destroy evidence across the board. Did they get anything? The master sergeant asked sharply. No, our security protocols caught it. But the sophistication level suggests this isn't some random SEAL doing a favor for Rodriguez. This is someone with serious technical skills and deep knowledge of classified systems. Davies frowned. An intelligence specialist, cyber warfare operator. That's my guess. which means this conspiracy involves someone from outside the direct SEAL community, someone who has access to systems most SEALs wouldn't even know exist. The implications rippled through the mess hall. If this extended beyond just the SEAL teams, if it involved intelligence personnel, cyber operators, maybe even command staff, the investigation was about to get exponentially more complicated. Sarah's phone rang again. She listened, her face going from grim to furious. Say that again, slowly. She listened for another moment, then hung up and addressed the room. We have a problem. A major problem. What now? Martinez asked, dreading the answer. Rodriguez just requested legal counsel. His lawyer is Commander Patricia Hayes. The Master Sergeant's face went white. The staff judge advocate, the senior JAG officer for the entire base. The same. And according to my source, she just filed a motion to dismiss all charges on the grounds that I entrapped Rodriguez by deliberately provoking him into an altercation. The mess hall erupted, people shouting disbelief and anger mixing into a toxic cocktail of sound. Sarah held up her hand for silence and eventually got it. This was always a possibility, she said, her voice cutting through the residual noise. When you go after powerful people, they use powerful connections to fight back. Hayes is one of the most respected military lawyers in the country. She's smart, ruthless, and very good at her job. Can she actually get the charges dismissed? The female sergeant asked. She can try. Whether she'll succeed depends on the evidence and the judge, but it's going to make everything harder, more complicated, more drawn out. Martinez felt her stomach drop. So Rodriguez might walk after everything. I didn't say that, but this fight just got a lot bigger. Sarah started pacing, thinking out loud. Hayes wouldn't take this case unless she thought she could win, which means she either genuinely believes Rodriguez was entrapped or she's being pressured by someone above her to provide him with top-tier legal defense. Who could pressure a commander? Davies asked. Anyone above her in the chain of command. Base commander, regional JAG, maybe even someone at the Pentagon level if Rodriguez has connections that high. The gunnery sergeant spoke up, his voice heavy with experience. I've seen this before. Not this exact scenario, but similar. A powerful operator gets caught doing something wrong, and suddenly the entire system mobilizes to protect him. Investigations get slow-walked, evidence disappears. Witnesses get intimidated into silence, and eventually the whole thing just fades away. The operator gets a slap on the wrist, maybe a transfer to another base, and life goes on. Not this time, Sarah said firmly. I've got federal authority. I've got ironclad evidence. And I've got witnesses who are brave enough to stand up. Hayes can file all the motions she wants, but she's not making this disappear. You sound very confident for someone whose case just got complicated, the Master Sergeant observed. I'm confident because I'm right. The law is on my side, the evidence is on my side, and most importantly, the truth is on my side. Hayes is good, but she can't magic away 1,000 witnesses and multiple camera angles showing her client committing assault. Martinez's phone buzzed. She looked at it and her face went pale. Oh no. What? It's a message from Commander Hayes' office. I'm being ordered to report for a deposition tomorrow morning at 0800 hours. Me too, said Davies, looking at his own phone. Around the room, phones were buzzing as the same message went out to everyone who'd given a statement or been mentioned as a potential witness. Hayes was moving fast, trying to lock down testimony, look for inconsistencies, build her defense before Sarah could fully organize the prosecution. Don't go alone, Sarah instructed. I'm going to have a JAG officer present for each deposition, someone not connected to Hayes or her office. And I want you all to remember something very important: you tell the truth. That's it. Don't embellish, don't speculate. Don't try to help the case by adding details you're not sure about. Just tell exactly what you saw, exactly what you experienced, exactly what happened. What if she tries to twist our words? Martinez asked. What if she makes us sound unreliable or biased? Let her try. The video evidence supports your testimony. She can't twist that. A private who'd been quiet throughout everything finally spoke up, his voice shaking. I'm scared to testify. What if I mess up? What if I say something wrong and Rodriguez goes free because of me? Sarah walked over and knelt down so she was eye level with the young private. Listen to me very carefully. Rodriguez's freedom or imprisonment will not rest on whether you perfectly remember every detail. It will rest on the totality of the evidence, which is overwhelming. Your testimony is one piece of a very large puzzle. Tell the truth to the best of your ability, and that's enough. That's all anyone can ask. The private nodded, but he still looked terrified. Sarah stood and addressed the whole room again. Commander Hayes is going to try to paint a picture of Rodriguez as a dedicated soldier who made one mistake in a moment of stress. She's going to emphasize his service record, his combat deployments, his awards and commendations. She's going to try to make you all look like you're persecuting a hero. How do we fight that? The female sergeant asked. By telling your stories. By showing the pattern. One incident might be a mistake. 17 incidents over 5 years is a pattern of behavior. Hayes can't explain that away, no matter how eloquent she is. Martinez stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loud in the quiet room. I need to call my family. They need to hear about this from me before it hits the news. It's already hitting in the news, Sarah said grimly, showing her phone. Local media picked it up an hour ago. Navy SEAL arrested after altercation at Camp Lejeune. It's spreading fast. Davies checked his social media and winced. It's on Twitter and Facebook and Reddit. There's already a hashtag. The gunnery sergeant looked over his shoulder and read aloud. Justice for Tank Rodriguez. Are you kidding me? There are people out there defending him already? Of course there are, Sarah said. Rodriguez has fans, people who followed his career, who see him as a symbol of military excellence. They're going to defend him without knowing the full story because that's what people do. They defend their heroes even when their heroes don't deserve it. Martinez pulled up her own social media and immediately regretted it. Her name was already circulating, people calling her a liar, an attention seeker. Worse things she didn't want to read. They're coming after me. People I've never met are calling me horrible names. Don't read it, the female sergeant advised, reaching over and gently taking Martinez's phone. Don't engage. Don't respond. Don't even look at it. Those people don't know you. They don't know what happened. Their opinions are worthless. But the damage was done. Martinez's hands were shaking, her breathing getting rapid and shallow. This is going to follow me forever. Even if Rodriguez gets convicted, even if justice happens, I'm always going to be the woman who got a Navy SEAL arrested. People are always going to hate me for it. Some will, Sarah acknowledged, but others will see you as someone brave enough to stand up to power, someone who refused to be silenced, someone who fought back. You can't control how people perceive you, but you can control whether you tell the truth. The truth is supposed to set you free, Martinez said bitterly, but right now it just feels like a prison sentence. Before Sarah could respond, the mess hall doors opened one more time, and a man in a captain's uniform walked in his face, stern and official. Everyone immediately came to attention. At ease, the captain said, his eyes scanning the room. I'm Captain Morrison, Base Operations Officer. I need everyone who witnessed the incident involving Staff Sergeant Rodriguez to remain here. Everyone else, you're dismissed. People started shuffling toward the exits, grateful for an excuse to leave the tension, but about 40 soldiers stayed the core group who'd seen everything firsthand. Morrison looked at Sarah. Agent Chen, I need to speak with you privately. Anything you need to say to me can be said in front of these witnesses, Captain. They've earned that right. Morrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Very well. I've been instructed by the base commander to inform you that this investigation is being elevated to a joint command review. You'll be working with a panel of senior officers to determine the appropriate course of action regarding Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and any related personnel. Sarah's eyes narrowed. A joint command review. Who requested that? The request came from Navspecwar Command. They want to ensure this investigation is handled appropriately given the sensitive nature of special operations personnel. Translation, they want to control the narrative and protect their people. Morrison's expression didn't change. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant. Sarah pulled out her phone and made a call. This is Agent Chen, badge number 7741. I need immediate clarification on jurisdiction regarding my current investigation at Camp Lejeune. She listened for a moment. Yes, sir, I understand. Thank you, sir. She hung up and looked at Morrison with a smile that had no warmth in it whatsoever. I just spoke with my director at DIA. Federal jurisdiction supersedes military command review. This investigation remains under my control, and any attempt to interfere with it will be treated as obstruction of justice. You can inform the base commander and Navspecwar Command of that. Morrison's face flushed red. Agent Chen, I don't think you understand the political realities here. Navy SEALs are a strategic asset. They operate in the most dangerous environments on the planet. They're national heroes. You can't just treat one of them like a common criminal. I can when they commit crimes. Or is there a special category in the UCMJ that exempts SEALs from accountability. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Captain? Spell it out for everyone in this room. Morrison looked around at all the watching faces, realizing he'd been maneuvered into a corner. I'm saying that this situation requires delicate handling. Rodriguez's case is going to be watched by people at the highest levels of government. How we handle it will set precedents for how special operations personnel are treated going forward. Good, Sarah said. Then let's set a precedent that they're held to the same standards as everyone else. That their service, while admirable, doesn't grant them immunity from consequences. That being elite means being held to higher standards, not lower ones. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost resigned. You're going to make a lot of enemies with this investigation, Agent Chen. I already have, but I'll sleep fine at night knowing I did the right thing. She gestured around the room at all the witnesses. These people risk their careers, their reputations, their safety to tell the truth. The least I can do is make sure their courage meant something. Morrison left without another word, and the mess hall felt smaller. Somehow, the walls closing in as the weight of what they were all facing settled over everyone like a heavy blanket. Martinez broke the silence first. We're really doing this. We're really going up against the entire SEAL command structure. We don't have a choice, Davies said, though his voice wavered. We're already in it. The only way out is through. Sarah's phone rang again, and this time when she answered, her entire demeanor changed. She went rigid, her face draining of color. When how long ago? She listened, her free hand clenching into a fist. I'm on my way. She hung up and looked at the group, and whatever they saw in her expression made everyone go quiet. Rodriguez escaped custody 20 minutes ago. The room exploded, shouting, disbelief, panic, everything happening at once. Sarah raised her voice over the chaos. Listen to me. He overpowered a guard during transport to the holding facility. He's currently at large on base. Security is conducting a sweep, but I need everyone here to stay together and stay alert. How does a Navy SEAL in custody just escape? The Master Sergeant demanded. There should have been multiple guards, proper protocols. There should have been, but the guard who was overpowered was alone with him, which violated procedure. Someone arranged for him to have that opportunity. The implications crashed over everyone like a wave. This wasn't just Rodriguez being resourceful. Someone had helped him set up the conditions for his escape, given him a chance to run. Martinez's voice was small, terrified. He's coming after us. After me. He knows I started this and he's going to... He's not getting anywhere near you, Sarah interrupted firmly. I'm calling in additional security right now. She pulled out her phone and started making calls, rapid-fire orders to people who could mobilize protective details. But the young private who'd been scared earlier was shaking his head. You don't understand. Tank knows this base better than anyone. He's run training exercises here for years. He knows every building, every access point, every blind spot in the security cameras. If he wants to get to someone, he'll find a way. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance, the gunnery sergeant said, moving to the mess hall doors and checking that they were secured. We lock down, we stay together, and we wait for proper security to arrive. Sarah finished her calls and turned back to the group. Security teams are being dispatched to protect every witness who gave a statement. But that's going to take time, 15, maybe 20 minutes before they're all in position. A lot can happen in 20 minutes, Davies said quietly. As if to punctuate his point, the lights in the mess hall suddenly went out. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, bathing everything in an eerie red glow, but the damage was done. Fear rippled through the room like electricity. That's not a coincidence, the Master Sergeant said, his training overriding his fear. Someone cut the power deliberately. Everyone get away from the windows and doors, now. People scrambled to comply, clustering in the center of the room as far from potential entry points as possible. Sarah had her phone out, using its flashlight to check the exits, her other hand resting on something at her hip that might have been a weapon. He's coming, Martinez whispered, and she sounded absolutely certain. I can feel it. He's out there, and he's coming for me. The female sergeant gripped her shoulder. He has to get through all of us first. A sound from outside metal scraping against metal. Everyone froze. The mess hall had gone completely silent, 40 people holding their breath listening. Another sound closer this time. Footsteps on concrete, deliberate and unhurried. Someone was circling the building, testing for entry points, looking for weaknesses. Sarah moved to the center of the group and spoke in a low, controlled voice. Listen very carefully. If Rodriguez breaches this room, I need all non-combatants to move to the far corner and get down. Anyone with combat training, you're with me creating a defensive perimeter. You can't fight Tank Rodriguez, someone protested. He's a Navy SEAL. He's been trained to kill people with his bare hands. So have I, Sarah replied, and I've already put him down once today. I can do it again. The footsteps outside had stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the noise had been pregnant with potential violence thick with anticipation. Then Tank's voice cut through the darkness loud and clear and absolutely devoid of sanity. I know you're all in there. I know you can hear me. He was shouting raw and ragged, a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. You ruined my life, all of you. For what? For doing my job, for being strong, for demanding respect. Nobody in the mess hall responded. Sarah had her finger to her lips, signaling silence, though her eyes were scanning the room, calculating angles and approaches. Martinez, Tank's voice cracked on the name. I know you're in there. This is your fault. Everything that's happened, it all started with you. If you just kept your mouth shut, if you just accepted what happened and moved on like everyone else, none of this would be happening. Martinez was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. The female sergeant pulled her closer, whispering reassurances that didn't seem to be reaching her. Come out here and face me. Tank was pounding on something outside, metal booming like a drum. Stop hiding behind federal agents and security protocols. Face me like a soldier. He's lost it, Davies whispered. He's completely snapped. That makes him more dangerous, the gunnery sergeant replied. A rational Tank Rodriguez would know this is suicide. An irrational one might do anything. Sarah was on her phone, again texting rapidly. A moment later, her phone vibrated with a response. Her expression went grim. Security teams are still 8 minutes out. There was an accident blocking the main road, likely staged. This was all planned. By who? The master sergeant hissed. Who's helping him? That's a question for later. Right now, we need to... The emergency exit at the far end of the mess hall exploded inward. Not literally, but Tank hit it with such force that the crash bar gave way and the door slammed open, flooding the room with night air and the sound of Tank's ragged breathing. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the outside lights, and he looked nothing like the confident SEAL who'd walked into this mess hall hours earlier. His uniform was torn, his face was bleeding from a cut above his eye, and his hands were scraped raw. But his eyes, visible even in the dim emergency lighting, were the worst part. They were wild, desperate, the eyes of a cornered animal with nothing left to lose. There you are, he said, his voice almost conversational now, which was somehow more terrifying than the shouting had been. My favorite people, the ones who destroyed everything I worked for. Sarah stepped forward, placing herself between Tank and the witnesses. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, you need to stand down. Right now, you're making this so much worse for yourself. Tank laughed high and brittle. Worse? How could it possibly be worse? My career is over. My wife is leaving me. My daughters won't look at me. The entire world thinks I'm a monster. There is no worse, Agent Chen. This is rock bottom. There's always worse. You could add assaulting 40 witnesses to your charges. You could guarantee you spend the rest of your life in prison instead of just a few years. You could make absolutely certain your daughters remember you as a violent criminal instead of just someone who made mistakes. They already remember me that way. You made sure of that. Tank took a step into the room and everyone backed up instinctively. You sat in this mess hall and you waited for me. You knew exactly what you were doing. You manipulated me into attacking you so you could destroy me. I sat here working. You attacked me. Those are facts. Facts. Tank spat the word. You want to talk about facts? Fact, I've served this country for 15 years. Fact, I've risked my life on missions that saved American lives. Fact, I've earned the right to be treated with respect, and you denied me that. So yes, I grabbed you. Yes, I got physical. But you provoked it. You wanted it to happen. Is that what you tell yourself? Sarah's voice was steady, clinical. That everyone who doesn't immediately bow down to your ego is provoking you. That's not how the world works, Rodriguez. That's not how respect works. Then teach me, Tank's voice cracked again, desperation bleeding through. Teach me how it's supposed to work, because I don't understand anymore. I did everything right. I followed all the rules. I trained harder than anyone else. I pushed myself beyond what normal people can endure, and I earned my trident. That was supposed to mean something. It does mean something. It means you achieved something incredibly difficult, but it doesn't mean you get to hurt people. I didn't hurt people. I was tough on people. I demanded excellence. That's what leaders do. Martinez's voice rang out from behind Sarah, stronger than anyone expected. You grabbed me in a supply closet and told me if I didn't keep you happy, you'd make sure I never advanced in rank. You backed me into a corner and put your hand over my mouth when I tried to scream. That's not demanding excellence, that's assault. Tank's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Surprise that she'd spoken, denial that it had happened that way, anger at being called out, and finally something that might have been shame, though it was quickly buried under more anger. That's not what happened. That's not how I remember it. Then your memory's convenient, Martinez shot back. Because that's exactly what happened, and I've spent 6 months trying to forget it, trying to convince myself it wasn't that bad, trying to just move on like everyone told me to. But it was that bad, and you don't get to rewrite it just because the truth makes you look like the predator you are. Tank took another step forward, his fists clenching. Don't call me that. Don't you dare call me that. I'm not a predator. I'm a soldier. I'm a protector. I've saved lives. And you've destroyed them too, the female sergeant added, standing up beside Martinez. My friend transferred off this base because of you. She was a good sailor, talented, dedicated, and you broke her with your harassment, your threats, your inability to take no for an answer. She left the Navy entirely because staying meant risking another encounter with you. I don't even know who you're talking about. That's the problem. You don't remember. Because to you, she wasn't important enough to remember. She was just another woman who existed in your space, and you felt entitled to her attention, her compliance, her fear. Tank was shaking his head, backing up slightly, overwhelmed by the onslaught of accusations. No, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. It's exactly what you do, Davies said, standing up now too. You threatened me when I beat you in a training scenario. You told me if I ever made you look bad again, you'd end my career. I was 19 years old, barely out of boot camp, and you, a decorated SEAL, threatened me because your ego couldn't handle losing to someone junior. One by one, others stood up, adding their voices to the chorus, telling their stories, confronting Tank with the accumulated weight of years of abuse and misconduct. The gunnery sergeant told about witnessing Tank steal credit for a junior officer's mission plan. A female corpsman described being cornered in the medical bay and propositioned aggressively. A young Marine recounted being humiliated in front of his unit for the crime of asking Tank a question he deemed stupid. The stories poured out an avalanche of truth, and Tank stood there taking it, his face cycling through denial and anger and grief and shame, unable to process the magnitude of harm he'd caused, unable to reconcile the hero he thought he was with the monster everyone was describing. Stop, he finally whispered. Please stop. But they didn't stop. They kept going, kept testifying, kept holding him accountable with their words, since the system had failed to hold him accountable any other way. And slowly, incrementally, something inside Tank began to crack. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, his hands coming up to cover his face. I didn't mean to. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be respected. I just wanted to matter. You mattered, Sarah said quietly, approaching him slowly, carefully. Your service mattered. Your sacrifices mattered. But somewhere along the way, you confused respect with fear and mattering with dominating, and you hurt a lot of people in the process. Tank was crying now, ugly, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right. You can't fix it. You can't make it right. The only thing you can do is stop making it worse. Surrender, face the consequences. And maybe years from now, after you've done the work of understanding what you did and why it was wrong, maybe then you can start to rebuild some small part of your life. My daughters, Tank choked out. What do I tell my daughters? You tell them the truth. You tell them their father made terrible mistakes and hurt people, and he's paying the price for that. You tell them that being strong doesn't mean never making mistakes. It means facing the consequences when you do. Sarah knelt down beside him, her voice gentler than it had been all day. And then you show them. You show them that accountability matters. That change is possible. That being a man means taking responsibility, not running from it. Tank looked up at her, his face streaked with tears and snot and blood, looking nothing like the legendary Navy SEAL he'd been that morning. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. To all of you, I'm sorry. The apology hung in the air, inadequate and incomplete, but it was something. Martinez was crying too now, the female sergeant holding her as she shook with the release of 6 months of fear and anger and trauma finally being acknowledged. Sarah pulled out her phone. Security, this is Agent Chen. Subject is contained and surrendering peacefully. Send the teams to the main mess hall, emergency exit. She looked down at Tank still kneeling on the floor. Stand up, Rodriguez. Stand up and face this with whatever dignity you have left. Tank slowly got to his feet, swaying slightly, exhausted physically and emotionally. His hands went behind his back without being asked, and when the MPs rushed in 3 minutes later, he didn't resist, didn't argue, didn't try to assert his rank or his status or his rights. He just went quietly, and as they led him away for the second time that day, he looked back at the mess hall full of people he'd hurt. I hope you all get what you need from this, he said, and his voice was hollow empty. I hope my destruction brings you peace. Martinez found her voice one last time. This isn't about your destruction. This is about our safety, our dignity, our right to serve without being harassed and abused. If you'd understood that from the beginning, none of this would have happened. Tank nodded slowly, accepting the truth of it, and then he was gone. Led away by the MPs leaving behind a room full of people who were processing what had just happened. The silence stretched for a long moment before the master sergeant spoke. Is it over? Is it really over? Sarah was making notes on her phone documenting everything that had just occurred. The immediate crisis is over. The investigation continues. Rodriguez will face trial, likely court-martial. Others who helped him, who threatened witnesses, who tried to obstruct justice, they'll be investigated and prosecuted too. This is going to take months, maybe years to fully resolve. But we're safe, Martinez asked. We can go back to our lives. You're safe from Rodriguez. Whether you can go back to your lives exactly as they were, that's a different question. This has changed all of you. You've been through something traumatic and then you stood up and fought back. That changes a person. Davy sat down heavily. I don't feel like I fought back. I feel like I just survived. Sometimes survival is the fight, the gunnery sergeant said. Sometimes just refusing to be broken, refusing to stay silent, refusing to let them win. That's the bravest thing you can do. Sarah finished her notes and looked around the room at all these people who'd been thrust into something none of them had asked for. What happened here today is going to ripple out. It's going to force conversations about accountability in special operations, about how we treat witnesses who come forward, about the culture that allowed Rodriguez to operate with impunity for years. Some people are going to hate you for it. They're going to call you traitors, weak anti-military, every name they can think of. But others are going to see you as heroes, as people who stood up when it was hard, who told the truth, when it was dangerous, who refused to let one man's ego matter more than 17 people's safety. I don't feel like a hero, Martinez said. I feel exhausted. That's honest. Hold on to that honesty. It's what got you through this, and it's what's going to get you through whatever comes next. The emergency lights flickered, and then the main power came back on, flooding the mess hall with harsh fluorescent brightness that made everyone blink and squint. Outside, the sound of multiple vehicles, arriving security teams and investigators, and the apparatus of military justice grinding into motion. Sarah headed for the door, then paused and looked back. One more thing. What you all did today, standing together, supporting each other, refusing to be divided and conquered, that's what changes systems. Not one person's courage, but collective courage. Remember that. When they try to isolate you, when they try to make you feel alone, remember that you have each other. That matters. She left, and slowly, gradually, the mess hall began to empty. People drifting off in small groups, processing, talking quietly, trying to make sense of a day that had started normally and ended with everything changed. Martinez was one of the last to leave, the female sergeant still at her side. As they reached the door, Martinez looked back at the empty mess hall, at the place where her life had fundamentally shifted. Do you think he meant it? She asked quietly. The apology. Do you think he actually understands what he did? The female sergeant considered the question. I think he's starting to understand. Whether that understanding leads to real change or just better manipulation, time will tell. But that's not your problem anymore. You did what you needed to do. You told the truth. You stood up. You survived. What he does with his consequences is on him, not you. Martinez nodded, taking one last look before stepping out into the night. The base was alive with activity, security teams securing the area, investigators documenting everything, the machinery of accountability finally belatedly grinding into action. 3 months later, Staff Sergeant Marcus Tank Rodriguez stood before a military court-martial and was found guilty on 17 counts of assault, harassment, and conduct unbecoming. He was sentenced to 6 years in military prison, reduction to E1 forfeiture of all pay and allowances, and a dishonorable discharge. His SEAL trident was stripped, his awards revoked, his legacy destroyed. Lieutenant Colson received 3 years for obstruction of justice and witness intimidation. Commander Hayes was reprimanded but not charged, though her career trajectory was permanently damaged by her association with the case. 15 other personnel received various punishments, ranging from letters of reprimand to loss of rank. The investigations Sarah conducted uncovered a culture of abuse and cover-ups that had persisted for over a decade within certain special operations units. Policy changes were implemented, oversight was increased, and the message was sent clearly. No one, regardless of rank or reputation or record, was above accountability. Martinez stayed in the military, promoted twice in the following 2 years, and became an advocate for other service members dealing with harassment and assault. She spoke at training sessions, helped develop new reporting protocols, and made it her mission to ensure no one else had to wait 6 months for someone to believe them. And in a military prison in Kansas Tank, Rodriguez sat in his cell and wrote letters to his daughters, trying to explain how the man they thought they knew had never really existed, trying to teach them the lessons he'd learned too late, trying to become someone who deserved their forgiveness, even if he never received it. Because in the end, that mess hall at Camp Lejeune hadn't just been the site of one man's downfall. It had been the place where 40 people decided that truth mattered more than convenience, that justice mattered more than reputation, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to stay silent when silence is what power demands.